Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to turn you over now to Dr. Maria Vagliasindi of the World Bank.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here with you today. I'm coming all the way from Washington, D.C., and I would like, first of all, to extend my gratitude to the organizer, PIDs. It's already from the keynote speech. This is proving to be a very interesting discussion, and I'm happy to provide some insight from the very recent publication, some of the insight from the Global Economic Prospect, the World Development Report, and some micro one. So without any hesitation, since I have very little time, I will skip through some of the results. So the first part of my presentation is going to give insight from the Global Economic Prospect, which is our leading publication highlighting global growth forecast and key risks to the global outlook. And this year specific topic was devoted to the importance of public investment, as well as how to weather storms and rebuilding resilience. The second part, so this will be providing a very high-level macro perspective. We move to the micro data, and as you know, the bank is collecting quite a fair amount of data through enterprise survey. So I want to give like a very, very short overview to the most recent result that around last year, the bank has made a major contribution of surveying 50 countries, so we have very recent data. And the idea is to expand it even further to include globally both advanced economy and developing economy. And finally, I couldn't help, but as I was part of the core team of the World Development Report, to provide some quick insight on what does it take for a country with strong ambition, as we already heard in the case of Philippines, to achieve not only upper middle income countries, which are already very close, or if not already going through, but high income countries. And so we will sort of proposing what is appearing to what we call the 3I strategy that we hope that will be able, to guide countries to escape from the middle income trap. And how to balance the forces of creation, preservation, and destruction. So as you probably figure out, this is really using the latest development of the Schumpeterian growth models. Okay, so here is all our publication from the development economic policy are publicly available, as they are all the data. And you can find it, all the key highlight, and also regional outlook, within our website. So just a very good news, the global economy is expected to stabilize for the first time after the pandemic. So this is the first time after 3 years in 2024. Though you see that, unfortunately, this is at the level, at least globally, that is weak compared to recent standard. And here, in a series of graphs, I wanted to show you how this is at the level globally. Global growth is 2.6% projected towards the end of this year, before edging up to 2.7% in the next 2 years. This is well below the 3.1% that was before the pandemic. And also for developed countries, even though they are really growing and much faster at 4%, this is also very much below what was in the previous decade. But what is also more important, as you can see in the middle chart, is that for the large bulk of countries, except Philippines, and here I would like to provide you some good news, unfortunately, there has been a global slowdown. So globally, unfortunately, most of the economies accounting for more than 80% of growth have been subject to episodes of growth slowdown. And that is also leading to the very pessimistic view of the fact that still catching up with high-income countries has not been possible. So unfortunately, and this will be also one of the themes in the World Development Report, so I'm not providing much. In terms of global outlook, although the risk in the outlook has been somewhat more balanced than during the pandemic, unfortunately, as you can see here, from all the factors circled in red, they are outweighing the positive upside risk. So let me just guide you through very, very quickly an explanation of conflict and geopolitical tension has been really like edging against the backdrop of conflict in the Middle East, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, intensification of armed conflict everywhere. So you might think that only some region, specific region, might be interested or affected by such trend, but unfortunately every single region, every single country, particularly region dependent on importing energy, including in East Asia and the Pacific, are actually underscored by disruption in the global supply chain, and sometimes they can also be affected by, decline in global food security trends. Then we see very worrisome, as you can see, increases in protectionism, which is following the recent proliferation of trade restriction and industrial policy measure. This presents an important downside risk to growth in all the region, because obviously restrictive trade policy are adding to production cost and disrupt supply chain. And particularly in regions that are more integrated in the global value chains, are those countries that are more vulnerable. And has already been touched before, in the keynote speech, and this is very important for this region, more frequent natural disaster and climate risk are becoming even an important factor and downside risk that needs to be emphasized, particularly in East Asia and in a country like Philippines, which are so vulnerable to such risk. Let me just say closely at least some positive news. It seems that, during the announcement, even yesterday from the Fed, is the first time, since 2020 that interest rate have been, finally is down. So that is really reveal how much, higher prospect that inflation is finally under control, and the hope that the economy will sort of rebounds back given the high income. So that, despite I put it as a potential risk of higher for longer interest rates are still very high, but those positive trends coming particularly from the United States and from many other countries that are looking up to faster easing monetary with lower inflation are important. And also stronger than expected growth in the United States. For your region, unfortunately, there are lower growth rates coming from China, which can in fact impact many of the countries which have strong links. So here, I couldn't help just really providing the insight on the trends in the global inflation. This has continued to decline, but yet it remains above the average and above the target in most advanced countries, as you can see here. And obviously, the initial phase of disinflation after the pandemic was underpinned by falling energy prices, which have now even partially rebounded. But still, you can see that greater than anticipated inflationary pressure has led to an upgrade revision, in the projection of near-term global inflation. We see some positive sides, but still we cannot really underestimate the impact that global inflation has had. And particularly, you can see in the middle, we already highlighted advanced economy interest rates are at levels that have never been seen before, and probably not even before the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, and in some cases are bound to remain high for a long period. And unfortunately, the long-term, and the short-term projection on possible decline in growth due to higher and longer period of high interest rates has to be, considered. And in some cases, we see that country for country, they continue to be the interest rate and the cost of borrowing is going to continue to be high. Here, I'm going as you can see, I'm flying through different topics. This was the special focus is on the scale of global investment Just to give an overview, for countries that are so vulnerable to climate change, we know that the global investment needed to achieve and meet the Sustainable Development Goal and to achieve commitment under the Paris Agreement is enormous. And it's so much so that it's becoming 8% or estimated to be in low-income countries. But it's still a very high percentage even in middle-income countries and in high-income countries. And it is particularly high-breaking for countries such as Philippines that have to consider more frequent climate change and vulnerability. Compounding these challenges since the global financial crisis, investment has been broad-based and at prolonged slumps, you can see, and have been declining in the decades in all the region, not only in advanced countries, but in all emerging countries, excluding China, and on the growth overall. And instead, we know how important and how powerful research underpinning the global economic prospect have proved, or public investment. Those public investment you see on the last slide and on the last graphs on the right-hand side can lead to a positive output response and leading in 5 years to an increase roughly higher than 1%, 1.1% in GDP, and is also boosting productivity, but more importantly, is also crowding in private investment, which is usually the most important component of growth. Okay. Here you see, of course, these very broad, very positive pictures of this research, show instead that there are lots of nuances. Obviously, those public investments seems to be much more efficient and much more effective with a significant effect you see here by 3 stars, where, there are wide rather than narrow fiscal space. So it's very challenging for countries that are characterized by high debt and a low fiscal space to achieve very effectively. It also varies a lot with the level of efficiency of public spending. And for instance, in my area, when working in infrastructure, we know that the higher the efficiency, the more is the unleashed potential positive impact of public investment. Again, we've been discussing as a possible challenge the increasing trade distortionary effect, and here you can see in the middle the increasing policy that have been just in 2023 increasing in all those countries. So this is one of the underlying reasons why also global trade is only projected to pick up at 2.5% this year, a significant improvement, but with all those risks. And the fact that there are new elections and lots of countries are potentially going to increase those protectionary and even green industrial policy is a risk that needs to be considered. Let me move on very quickly. As you see, I provide you just a quick overview. What business say? Ultimately, we know that the private sector plays a really crucial role in economic development, driving productivity growth, investment, job opportunities, and raising government revenue. The private sector business are essential in terms of bolstering sustainable economic growth and also reducing poverty. To unleash the private sector to this full potential, we know that it's important to understand, and we are also here in this forum, to hear the views of business. What do they think? And this is the bank is collecting, as I was mentioning before, a fair amount of information through the World Bank Enterprise Survey, which has been providing, again, publicly accessible, nationally representative firm-level data, which is collected using a very amount already tested methodology, and is enabling comparison across different countries and over time. And the idea is now to launch those surveys in all countries and have it more frequent available data. So here again, I'm going to provide a quick overview of some of those indicators that you can find. And again, you are free to download the full raw data of those surveys, the result and the publication, so I invite you to look it through. And I'm going to provide you some insight about all what we call the 5 verticals in the bank. So this is one indicator that we look, the indicator related to our own vertical people, human development. We were very reassured that human participation, usually in most of the survey, the question that is asked is just simply whether a female is leading a firm. Here instead we have the share of women workers across firms. And you can see it's increasing substantially as the country is enhancing financial development and enhancing its growth. We can see that in the case of the Philippines, it's significantly higher than the world global average and also the regional average from household survey. But it's varying a lot across different locations, something that we need to identify. Looking at the dimension of the planet, which is very important, we see also the adoption of energy efficiency measure to reduce emission, waste, or any type of pollution are also increasing as the level of management practice is also enhancing. And also here, I wanted to give you some identification of what is the current level for Philippines. Here, the idea is lagging behind, but not significantly so, the global average and the regional average. East Asia is doing reasonably well compared to other regions. But again, those values vary significantly within the countries. And and here we can see the reason why. On infrastructure, and again, this is hindsight, our question asks the percentage of firms suffering from outages. So where electricity is not reliable, and in many cases they have to adopt generators and anything. And again, the very interesting things, we see that the share of firms experiencing outages is declining substantially as countries move from, by income, and that is why important. But even more interestingly, you see that within one country, at the level of low income, let's look at the case of Madagascar, the standard deviation is particularly high. So you have some location within Madagascar where it's extremely low, the probability of outages, but you have also some of the region in which they are almost as in advanced country. But the standard deviation is significantly higher and it's declining as income finds from this region. Also in Indonesia, the variation is much less. And in advanced country like Portugal, is almost constant, the level of reliability within the countries. And again, here I just wanted to compare the value for Philippines compared to the global average. You can see that it's not doing so badly in terms of percentage of firms, but still, the fact that lots of firms, a very high percentage of firms, is still forced to own or share a generator means that they are challenging, and this is the cost based from the inadequate infrastructure. And also you can see how the outages are varying across different regions. And of course, the quality of electricity is much higher in the national capital region, but is still lagging behind in many of the other locations within the country. We talk about digitalization, which was mentioned. Also, digitalization is statistically different between unconstrained credit firms and others, which was surprisingly to us. But unfortunately, this is also the message that as financial dependence is increasing, also digitalization, it becomes easier. And finally, my last indicator is proving what is important in the catch-up of emerging economies with advanced countries. The productivity gap is still high, but you can see that for low-income countries, the productivity gap compared to advanced countries is 4.3. For high-income countries, it's 1.8. And here, again, I'm running through lots of messages, but you can find both the presentation and the report in our website. I wanted to guide you what are the key findings of the middle income trap. Why did focus on the World Development Report on middle income countries? Middle income countries, as you can see here in this summary table, are now accounting for roughly 40% of the GDP and prosperity, they are also accounting for 60% of people living in extreme poverty, and worrisome for the environment, they are representing 60% of global CO2 emission. Growth has been, particularly in the past, been very much driven by consumption of fossil fuel. But these are 108 countries belonging to middle-income countries. So that is why I was astonished, because even 10 years ago, there were very many fews. So there have been a lots of upgrade from low-income country to middle-income country, much less so from middle-income country to upper-income countries. And that is why we look at those subset of countries, which of course are very heterogeneous, and Philippines is one of those. To get rich is glorious, and of course, if you are a policymaker in any of those middle-income countries, as we heard today from the Philippines, you have big plans, you have big ambition to reach high-income country, possibly in very short time period. And as you can see, China, back in the days, Xiaoping was nearly 50 years ago here, had big plans to reach high-income country by 2035. Philippines is almost close by, that they want to achieve such status by 2040, particularly realizing on a very high and vigorous increase and expansion of the middle class. So if those plans are to succeed, your country will reach high income status in less than one generation. Your firms will be earning like never before. Your people will remain also more prosperous. And you will be also succeeding in eradicating poverty, and so that you don't leave anyone behind. That's the words that we heard in the opening plenary section. But there is a problem. Big plans comes also with big problems. And as you can see here, unfortunately, according to widely used measures, such as those from the bank, the World Development Indicators, you see the economic growth in middle-income countries, including your own, is not accelerating. If anything, is slowing down, as we saw from the global economic prospect. And unfortunately, since the 70s, the mean income of per capita middle-income countries has never risen above 1/10 of those of the United States. I never saw such a flat and disappointing figures. So catching up has been slow. Why is that? One of the reasons that we see is that growth in middle-income countries, it is different, but unfortunately, strategies for growth that have been used are still used on factors of increasing investment and factor accumulation. And unfortunately, a natural occurrence, as all economists know, is that the marginal productivity of capital declines over time. So growth is becoming much more difficult and much more sophisticated. And that's what we're turning from one that is going to be the key message from this report, that if you're aiming to grow, it's like you cannot drive your car in the first gear and you want to accelerate. You need to change gears. So originally, it is important, and we've seen it also in the global economic prospect, the importance of investment, the one-eye strategy. But as you grow, it is important also to complement and to move from investment also to infusion. Infusion means bringing and catching up to global technology and bringing global technology and getting closer to the global frontier based on some country. This is what Korea did, for instance, initially was imitating infusion from countries such as Japan. Then, as soon as the enterprises becoming closer and have been already adopt global innovation domestically, you can start thinking about innovation, and this is the free eye. And that's why we thought this framework is very useful to figure out one of the problems why catching up is not happening as fast as we come. And here is the example of Korea that proves, imagine Korea in the 60s, the GDP was dismal, was something around 1,200 US dollar per capita. And in 2023, this has been growing an unprecedented 33,000. And you can see that the 3I strategy here is also proved as one powerful, ingredient of the progress. And as Korean conglomerate has been catching up with foreign firms, you see that the infusion subsidy from the authority has been declining, and investment in research and development and innovation symmetrically has been going up. That is how this has been complementing infusion by innovation and has led to such a great growth prospect. One other example, you usually refer to countries that already achieve high-income countries, the case of Poland. It's completely different because it was coming from its socialist part of the former Soviet Union, and its membership with the European Union that has been a major channel of progress. As you can see, the per capita income has been growing from 20% of the average of the European Union to 50%. Here, the model was hardening the budget constraints and the subsidy and changing the strategy of enterprises. Enterprises were first bound to production target. And rather than production target, then the target moves to profitability, improving market shares, and the foundation to attract investment. Poland has also increased substantially tertiary education, and that has been really become close, and the closeness to the European Union has been one driver of the success. Here, very shortly, I want to see how both the public and private sector, in the case of Chile, has played a big role. In the case of the public agency for export and promotion, this has been made sure that originally Chile was very much exporting mineral resources. That has been going down in terms of export, and is now successful exporting global value chain of many products, including salmon. And interestingly, also an NGO, Fundación Chile, a private non-profit firm, has been promoting technological transfer in countries such as Norway, also for making sure the adaptation of Norwegian salmon farming technology to local conditions, making Chile now a really leading world exporter of salmon. Okay, here I'm flying through the framework. I just wanted to leave you with the key highlight. And wanted to tell you that one of our leading advisors, Ufuk Akçit, was really leading us through the third interpretation and the third view, the most recent, on the process of creative destruction, that is back to the age of Joseph Schumpeter, and in his 1942, flagship publication. So what is the key highlight of the first view is that society benefit when an entrepreneur with talent and new vision introduce innovation, introduce new product, displacing old product, introducing new business model and generating higher productivity and growth, as we can see. But often we know that incumbent in this vision are seen as somehow, they need to be disciplined because they might impose in particularly high entry and barrier to entry to defend their own interest. This is probably, one of the most salient depiction of the energy sector and the tension between low carbon and high carbon vested interest. You can see there that technological process follow a path with efficiency in which fossil fuel are extracted and burned as increases, and a lot of vested interest, including public attitude in fossil fuel, have impeded new firms and new entrants for entering the market. In the second views, which is from Philippe Aghion, that at that time was just starting his career and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology together with the Canadian economist Peter Howitt. In this case, it's looking more at the growth that is coming from entrant, from competition. This formulation of creative destruction emphasizes both the importance not only of creating, even larger reservoirs of talent, and is coming both from incumbent and entrant. So not investing in the talent, for instance, I will show you in one of the next emails, of women and minority, is keeping them out of the most rewarding activity and is reducing substantially growth. In the final interpretation, we see that here is not only entrant, but is both entrant and incumbent can add value. So this is the new Schumpeterian view by Akchit and Kerr. And we will be happy to put you in touch with its third generation of Schumpeterian type of, interesting insight. And I will give you some kind of illustration right now. Okay, let's look at the case of India. Example always tells and figures much more than long stories. Basically, in the 60s, the Tata Business Group, a major conglomerate based in India, needed computer for its new business. This is part of what we call the third industrial revolution. After the first industrial revolution has used water and steam to automatize, and the second one, electricity to faster produce. Now we are in an age in which, in the 20th century, you need computers, you need internet, you need those important components. But at that time, India were really blocking import and putting lots of import restriction to protect state-owned enterprises. To allow for foreign hardware to be imported, the government required those companies to basically export their product. And here is where the Tata Business Group was so successful that, basically has been given such high growth. And this has been leading to a lot of new entrants, including here we see the case of Infosys. And so they've been able to stitch this opportunity, making now India one of the most talented, low-cost provider of software and software development throughout the world. However, and here I refer to my own countries, with incumbent and market leaders, there are also a lots of risk. And here you can see how incumbent have been using their dominance to block progress, and they tend to bolster political connection. And here is what we call the leader paradox. With political connection in Italy at that time, political forces were able to own and to participate in management of firms. You see also that the productivity has been going down and the number of patents has been going down. So it's important also to make sure you discipline incumbent and you create those institutions fostering innovation. Final graphs that I wanted to emphasize, and is really the third area in which we see that the entrants are adding value. And you can see that in the United States, once the restriction towards women, the participation of women and minority in the economy have been lifted, growth has been increasing substantially. That is not the only factor, but it's certainly where it's important to move away and to attract and allocate talent. And let me now just wrap up with this presentation. You see that here the value and the counterfactual of the contribution of those talent from women and minority.